Okay, I have just finished putting in all of my openings for my doors and windows. So hopefully you've done the same, or will do so as soon as we finish, or you finish the videos for this week. You don't have to have it done yet. I did notice one thing as I was going through, and that is that by no means are all of these doors 3 feet, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing I have the tape measure because they're all definitely much narrower than 3 feet. In some cases, they're as narrow as 2'6". So despite what we think a typical door is, obviously when we get a plan, sometimes we find out that we might be a little wrong. All right. I'm going to discuss the scale tool quickly because we haven't really gotten into that yet, and that's going to come into play when we create this elliptical shape here for this oval tunda. So first things first, we're going to kind of move away from this, and I'm just going to demonstrate how the scale tool works because it's a very good and very important tool which you'll use quite a bit. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a rectangle here, double click and make it a group, push pull this up. And I just want to make this rectangle a little bit asymmetrical. So I'm going to pull down here on this side, and then I'm going to select this piece here and pull it in a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and make I'll just cut this face up a little bit and make it give it a color so it's obvious what's going on. So the first things first that that scale does, when you select your shape. And in this case, I've got my asymmetrical little kind of partial pyramid here going. When you select your shape, you're going to go to your scale tool, which looks like this. It's basically the little rectangle that looks like it's getting a little bigger with an arrow. Go ahead and select that. And what that does is that gives you a series of grabbing points. So as I move around this, I can see that my scale is active, and I have some options. And as I move my mouse over each of these little nubs, they kind of like let you know what they're corresponding to. So if I if I move my mouse down to this one below in this corner, it's corresponding to the one up in this corner, and vice versa. So if I'm going to click onto this one, it'll do the same thing. So you can see that you've really got corresponding all the way across. You've got the ones going on the side, you've got the ones going on the bottom, and then you've got the ones on the faces and in the corners. So they all kind of work in one particular way. If I'm going to click on the corner, what that's going to do as I click, and now I've taken my hand off the left click and I'm just moving it up and down. What that's going to do is that's going to scale uniformly in perfect proportion to itself. So as I move this and make this bigger, as I scroll back a little bit and pull it up, it's maintaining the proportions of all the sides and all the faces. And that works exactly the same way from every corner to every corner. So if you just want to make one thing bigger, that's how you're going to do that, is you're going to use the corners. If I want to stretch it in one direction, I'm going to use the faces. So there's the tops and the sides. So if I click on this point and drag it in this direction, it's going to start stretching it in the direction in which I'm pulling, and you'll notice that it's actually warping the proportions here. As I squish it in a little bit, the proportions change greatly, just as the same as if I pull it out this way. So if I hit escape, the same thing is going to happen on these faces. So I'm stretching it in one direction or the other. Let's go ahead and hit escape again. And I'm stretching it in one direction or the other, from top to bottom. I'm squishing it or stretching it up and down. The final bits that you can use are the opposite points on the line, and what that's going to do is that's going to pull it in both directions and start to kind of warp it. You can kind of warp it flat, and you can stretch it to or from itself. I don't use these as often because you've got a lot less control over these. There's always a reason for every one of these tools in this program, so there's no reason to say that you won't use this, and you'll probably find a reason to use it. But I don't like having the lack of control. What I'd like to do is I'd like to click from this point, then click from this point to this point, so I have a little bit more control over what it is I'm doing. Let me hit Control Z here. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of scale. The other thing that's interesting to note is that if you are working with just a flat face, let me go ahead and hit Select to double click this and G to group it. If I'm working with just a flat face now and I go to my scale tool, What scale is going to do for me here is it's either going to make the thing uniformly bigger, the face uniformly bigger using just the corners. And in this case, I only have the option of the 2 corners because I don't have a 3D shape. Or I can squish and manipulate the sides. So I can't really do anything to the center of it because there's no 3D volume to this shape. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. One other final thing to note about scale that's great is that I can scale something inside out to mirror it, not in place, but to mirror it next to itself. So if you want to mirror something and you want to reverse the position it's in, you click from one point and then you start to pull it in and you actually pull it through itself. And you can see at the bottom that it's telling me that I'm on the red axis and how far I go. If I go minus 1.00, that's perfectly the same size as it was before. So I can actually mirror it in place, not in place, I'm sorry, I can mirror it next to where it was, and I can do the same thing if I go from top to bottom. It's just going to reverse, and it's going to maintain the same exact proportions as long as I get to negative 1.00. The final thing I want to show you about scale is that if I make another shape here, double click that to make it a group, and open it up and push pull, I can scale one face of a shape. So if I select just the top face of this and then hit my scale, I can scale just the top face if I want to pull that in so that it's dragging these 3 faces over into this corner, or dragging just this one face and these 2 lines in this direction. So you can create some pretty interesting shapes using this technique, and I definitely have. So I'll show you another example with something a little bit more wild. So let's take the freehand tool and just draw kind of a weird freehand shape here. I'm going to double click and make this a group and open it up and push pull it in place. Now I will select the top face only by double clicking and activate my scale, and I can click and drag these points inward. And if I push pull again, this face up again, I can do the same thing all over again. Go to my scale tool and start to create some sort of a jagged and more unique shape. Now again, this is a completely abstract and off-the-wall shape, but you can see that if you use just scale with one face, you have quite a few options to make some interesting things. Let me go ahead and close this down. We'll go ahead and delete that. And delete. And I'm going to scale this back up through itself because I want to talk about another tool in the next video that does kind of the same thing that I just did by scaling something in on itself, which is the flip along tool.